My fiancé looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Harper, I'm not gambling my future on someone like you." He didn't know that I had already built a luxury empire behind his back, one he never imagined I was capable of. And that night, when I walked away, I decided I wasn't just leaving him. I was ending the entire game he thought he was winning. Stay with me as I tell you what really happened. If my story connects with you, I'd love for you to show some support, maybe share it, or pass it along to someone who needs to hear it. My name is Harper Ellison, and for most of my life people have looked at me and only seen the quiet girl in the corner. I never raised my voice, never made a scene, never tried to prove anything to anyone. I grew up with a single mom who worked double shifts to keep us afloat, and I learned early that talking less and working more kept life steady. Maybe that's why Miles chose me. He liked that I wasn't loud, demanding, or full of expectations. He once told me I was easy to handle, and back then I laughed it off, thinking it was just a joke. But things like that are never jokes. When we met, Miles was this polished, confident man from a comfortable family. His mother loved to mention the words good breeding, especially when she thought I couldn't hear. I didn't fit their picture. I wasn't born into privilege, I didn't know the right people, and I wasn't raised to expect anything handed to me. But I had something none of them understood. I had ambition. Quiet ambition, but real. While Miles thought I was working in a small local boutique, I was actually spending every free hour building my own luxury brand. Designing, sourcing, testing, marketing. Everything done quietly, carefully, and completely on my own. I named it Ellison Lane, after my mom, and I kept it a secret from almost everyone. Not because I was hiding, but because I wanted to grow it without pressure, without voices telling me I was dreaming too big. Miles was one of those voices. He always said things like, "You're smart, Harper, but dreams don't pay bills," or "Be realistic." So I stayed silent about my success. I let him believe I was small, just so I could keep my peace. But the night everything fell apart, he showed me exactly who he truly was. We were sitting in his living room, talking about our future, our wedding, where we'd live what we wanted. I thought it was a normal conversation. Then, out of nowhere, he looked at me with this cold, tired expression and said those words that burned into me. "I'm not gambling my future on someone like you. Someone like me." As if I was a risk. As if I didn't bring anything to the table. As if I wasn't worth anything beyond the calm I gave him. He had no idea that while he was speaking, I was already planning to walk away. And when I stood up, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I simply realized the man I loved never saw me at all. That was the moment my story truly began. I grew up in a small apartment with peeling paint and a fridge that made a loud humming noise every night. It was just me and my mom, Linda. She worked 2 jobs, one at a diner and another cleaning offices after hours. I hardly saw her, but whenever she was home, she'd sit beside me, hold my hands, and say, "Harper, no one is coming to save us. But you? You can save yourself." Those words shaped me more than anything else. I wasn't born into comfort, but I was born into grit. While other kids had weekends filled with sports or sleepovers, mine were spent helping my mom sort bills, clipping coupons, and figuring out how to stretch leftovers into another meal. I didn't grow up with wealth, but I grew up with determination, the quiet kind that stays close to your chest. People underestimated me from the beginning. Teachers assumed I'd end up somewhere simple. My classmates thought I was too soft to do anything bold. Even as an adult, I carried that shadow of being the girl who came from nothing. Maybe that's why I worked so hard in secret, because I never wanted anyone to tell me what I could or couldn't be. Ellison Lane started as a sketchbook filled with designs I hid under my bed. Then it became a small online store I managed at night after long shifts. I tested fabrics myself, learned how to negotiate with suppliers, and built every part of the brand from the ground up. There were nights I stayed awake until sunrise just to package orders. No one helped me. No one believed in me. But each sale felt like proof that I wasn't invisible. I kept it all quiet, not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted to see who loved me for me, not for a bank account or a title. When I met Miles, I thought I finally found someone who saw me beyond my past. He was charming, confident, and so sure of himself. Too sure, maybe. From the beginning, he liked that I was humble. He liked that I didn't chase big dreams. Whenever I mentioned an idea, he'd smile and tell me, "Babe, stay realistic. Not everyone is meant to build an empire." I remember telling him once that I wanted to design full-time. He laughed lightly and said, "That's cute. But be practical." I swallowed that hurt and pretended it didn't matter. I convinced myself he was being protective, not discouraging. Looking back now, I see it clearly. He wanted me small, manageable, predictable. And I allowed it, thinking it was love. Thinking compromise meant shrinking myself, so he felt taller. So I hid Ellison Lane from him. I hid my growing sales, my loyal customers, my partnerships with small boutiques. I hid the fact that I was already earning more than he ever guessed. I hid everything because I knew, deep down, that if he saw me succeed, he'd try to pull me back down. Now I realize it wasn't love that kept me quiet. It was fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of losing him. Fear of him seeing the real me and deciding I was too much. But the truth? I was never too much. I was only too much for a man who needed me to be less. The red flags were there long before everything collapsed, but at the time, I brushed them aside and called them little misunderstandings. Now, when I look back, I can't believe how clearly they pointed to who Miles really was. The first signs were small. Whenever I shared an idea, something I was excited about, something creative, Miles would smile in that polite, patient way and say, "That's nice, Harper, but it's not really practical." He said it so calmly that I didn't even realize it was dismissal. I thought he was just being honest. But over time, I noticed a pattern. He never dismissed ideas that came from anyone else. Just mine. Then there were the moments when he took credit for things he had nothing to do with. One evening, we were out with some of his co-workers, and someone complimented the handmade scarf I wore. Before I could respond, Miles laughed and said, "Yeah, I helped her pick the material. She gets overwhelmed with choices." I stood there frozen, knowing he had never stepped foot inside a fabric store with me. But everyone laughed, and I smiled along like it didn't sting. He loved reminding me how lucky I was to have him. He'd say it jokingly, but the more he said it, the more I realized he meant it. If I got invited somewhere or someone complimented me, he'd lean in and whisper, "See? I told you being with me helps." It felt like he believed he was doing me a favor simply by being my fiancé. And then there were the comparisons. Always subtle, always coded in a tone that sounded like he was trying to help me improve. He'd say things like, "My coworker's girlfriend comes from such a sophisticated family. You'd like her." Or, "If you dressed more like Olivia from accounting, you'd look more polished." It was constant, always pointing toward women who had richer families, fancier backgrounds, or the kind of connections he wished I had. Sometimes I wondered if he wished I were one of them. His mother, Vivian, made everything worse. On the surface, she was polite, overly polite. She'd compliment me in ways that didn't feel like compliments at all. "Your dress is lovely, dear. It's amazing what you can find on a budget." Or, "You're very sweet, Harper." Simplicity can be charming. She'd smile gently every time, like she was doing me a favor by insulting me softly. Once, when Miles left the room, she leaned closer and said, "I hope you understand how much responsibility comes with joining our family. We've always aimed high, and Miles deserves a partner who lifts him up." I knew exactly what she meant, but I swallowed the hurt and nodded anyway. I stayed quiet because I believed love required patience. I believed relationships meant accepting flaws, giving people the benefit of the doubt, and trying to grow together. So I convinced myself that the problem was me, that I needed to be more understanding, more forgiving, more adaptable. But the truth was simple. The red flags weren't misunderstandings. They were warnings. And I ignored every single one of them. It started with a dinner at Miles' parents' house, a supposed family meeting, to discuss our upcoming wedding. I already felt tension in the air, but I tried to push it aside. I wanted everything to be perfect, to keep the peace, to pretend that love could smooth over the growing cracks. That illusion ended the moment Miles slid a folded document across the table toward me. "It's the prenup," he said casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I unfolded it and skimmed the pages. Every clause heavily favored him, protecting his assets while offering me almost nothing. My heart sank, not because of the money, but because of what it said about how he viewed me. It wasn't trust he was asking for. It was control. I hesitated, and he noticed immediately. "Come on, Harper," he said with a smirk. "Don't overthink it. You're not exactly running a business or anything." My blood ran cold. He didn't know that I was. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him that Ellison Lane was thriving. I kept quiet, as I always had, because arguing would only give him power over my emotions. Vivian, ever the silent observer until the perfect moment, leaned in with a sympathetic smile. At least, that's what she thought it was. "Miles is right," she said softly. "It's just common sense. Harper is sweet, but she's a long-term financial risk. You have to protect yourself." The words cut deeper than I expected. She wasn't protecting her son. She was declaring me unworthy of standing beside him, not as an equal, but as a liability. I looked at Miles, hoping for a flicker of understanding, but there was nothing. Just satisfaction, a quiet arrogance that made my stomach turn. He saw me not as his partner, not as someone who had worked hard to create something meaningful, but as a stepping stone he could either use or discard. It was in that moment that I felt the emotional distance solidify. I realized they weren't seeing me at all. Every gentle smile, every polite word, every conversation about the future, they had all been filtered through their own lens, a lens that saw me as inadequate, as someone who needed limits and guidance, someone who needed to be kept small. I felt a shift inside me. It was subtle at first, like the quiet click of a lock being released. I wasn't angry yet. I was calculating, observing, taking mental notes. I saw Miles' arrogance for what it was. I saw Vivian's manipulations clearly for the first time. And for the first time in years, I stopped trying to make them see me differently. That night, as I walked home, I carried no illusions about love or compromise. I carried clarity. I was not a burden. I was not a risk. I was a force they could never control. And in that clarity, I began to emotionally detach, to let go of any hope that they would ever see my worth. The prenup, their smirks, their assumptions, it all became a mirror showing me exactly who I needed to be without them. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. I had planned to stop by Miles' apartment to drop off a contract I had signed for our wedding vendors. I didn't expect to hear anything unusual. Just a quick hello, maybe a coffee while he signed a few papers. But the moment I stepped inside, I froze. Miles wasn't alone. Colton Reeves, his coworker and friend, was lounging on the sofa, laughing at some story Miles was telling. I paused near the doorway, pretending to be absorbed in checking my phone. And then I heard it. "I mean, honestly, I'm only marrying Harper because she's obedient," Miles said, leaning back casually, a cruel grin on his face. "Once I get that promotion, maybe I'll upgrade. Someone with better connections, more money. You know how it is." Every word hit me like a punch. Obedient. Upgrade. He didn't even try to hide his contempt. It wasn't a joke, not a slip, not a thoughtless comment. It was calculated, cruel, and entirely unfiltered. The man I thought I loved, the man I trusted, saw me as nothing more than a convenience, a placeholder until someone better came along. I remember standing there, frozen, feeling my chest tighten, my stomach twist. The room spun slightly as the realization settled in. Everything I had believed about him, everything I had hoped for, had been a lie. Miles never saw me as an equal. He never saw me as a person with dreams, ambitions, or value. I was a box to check, a trophy, a temporary prop in his life story until a better version appeared. Colton laughed, oblivious to the storm I felt inside. Miles continued, describing how easy it was to manage me, how he could guide me subtly and no one would notice. Each sentence was a reminder of all the times I had downplayed my success, all the moments I had stayed quiet, thinking I was keeping the peace. I had been nothing more than a convenience, and he had been completely honest about it with his friend, just not with me. In that instant, something inside me shifted. The hurt was sharp, but beneath it was clarity, a cold, precise understanding of exactly who he was and what he had underestimated. I didn't need to confront him yet. I didn't yell or demand an explanation. I simply listened, absorbing every word, committing them to memory. By the time they noticed me standing in the doorway, I was already detached. My heartbreak was there, yes, but it was laced with resolve. I realized that walking away wouldn't be enough. I couldn't just leave. I had to make sure that both Miles and Vivian understood exactly who they had misjudged. They had underestimated me in every possible way, and now it was time they faced the truth, quietly, deliberately, and fully. That day marked the turning point. My love, my trust, my hope in him, all of it shattered. But what replaced it was something stronger. The determination to rise, to reclaim my power, and to ensure that the people who tried to diminish me would learn, in no uncertain terms, that I was never someone to take lightly. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I simply handed the ring back to Miles, letting it drop into his palm like it weighed nothing at all. He looked at me, confusion and annoyance flickering across his face, and asked, "What is this? What's wrong?" I took a slow breath, keeping my voice steady. "It's over, Miles. I can't do this anymore." He laughed, sharp and incredulous, as if I had just told him the most ridiculous joke in the world. Over? Harper, don't be ridiculous. You'll regret this. You don't even understand what you're giving up. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I could see it in his eyes. He believed he still held all the power, that I was the one losing. But in that moment, I knew the truth. I was the one finally free. I walked out of the apartment without looking back, letting the click of the door behind me seal the decision I had made long before that day. I didn't go home. I didn't call anyone. I went straight to Amara Holt, my lawyer and trusted advisor, someone who had always believed in me even when I pretended I was just getting by. I told her everything, the prenup, the sneers, the hidden contempt, the cruel words I had overheard. Amara listened, nodding as I spoke, then laid out a plan that felt almost too simple. Detach everything Miles could ever touch, secure my business, and make sure my future was entirely my own. Over the next few weeks, I quietly began restructuring Ellison Lane. I moved accounts, renegotiated contracts, and ensured that every asset, every client, and every supplier agreement was under my sole control. I changed signatures, updated banking authorizations, and set up new branches that no one outside of my closest team could trace directly to me. Every step was deliberate, quiet, and invisible to Miles. I didn't need confrontation or drama. I needed independence. Meanwhile, I drafted an announcement for Ellison Lane's expansion, a major product launch that would solidify our presence in the luxury market. But I didn't release it yet. Not a word to the public, not a whisper to Miles or his family. The point wasn't publicity yet. The point was preparation. I wanted to be fully ready, to step into the next chapter of my life without hesitation or compromise. Through it all, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years. There was no panic, no fear, no doubt. Just clarity. Miles believed he had power over me, that he could belittle me, that he could make me regret walking away. He had no idea that his arrogance and cruelty had already fueled my next move, that every insult, every slight, every dismissive comment had been quietly catalogued and transformed into strategy. When I left Amara's office that day, I didn't feel loss. I didn't feel sadness. I felt purpose. For the first time, I understood what it meant to take control. Not with words, not with confrontation, but with quiet, relentless action. And I knew deep down that the moment I finally revealed Ellison Lane's full power, Miles and Vivian would see exactly who they had underestimated. The morning Ellison Lane's new product line launched, I woke before sunrise, heart racing with anticipation. Months of design, planning, and preparation had led to this moment. The collection was bold, luxurious, and unapologetically refined, the kind of line that demanded attention. By mid-afternoon, every single item was sold out. I watched the numbers climb, each notification a silent affirmation that I had built something remarkable entirely on my own. For years, I had hidden my success, underplayed my achievements, and allowed others, especially Miles, to assume I was just getting by. Now, the quiet satisfaction of seeing my brand thrive without him knowing was intoxicating. Ellison Lane wasn't just a company. It was a statement. Every sale, every client who reached out in awe, every small boutique requesting a partnership felt like a personal victory. I had worked tirelessly, and finally the world, and soon the people who had doubted me, were paying attention. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but notice the news trickling in about Miles. He had been counting on a promotion at his firm for months, confident that his charm and family connections would carry him through. But it wasn't happening. Performance reviews came back, citing poor leadership and arrogance. The promotion he assumed was his had been given to someone else. The man who once mocked me for small ambitions was now facing the consequences of his own entitlement. I allowed myself a small, private smile, a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes life balances itself out in ways you don't need to force. Then came Vivian's charity gala. She had spent weeks preparing, meticulously curating guest lists, and bragging about the impact of her event. I arrived quietly, dressed in one of my own designs, confident yet understated. The night passed with polite conversation, clinking glasses, and the usual display of wealth and prestige. Vivian was glowing, congratulating herself on every success, never suspecting that the evening would soon take an unexpected turn. When the charity's organizers announced the largest anonymous donation of the night, a hush fell over the room. Vivian's smile faltered, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Then the name behind the donation was revealed: Harper Ellison. The room murmured, shocked whispers rippling through the crowd. Vivian's face drained of color as she realized the truth. The very woman she had dismissed as a financial risk, the woman she had subtly insulted for years, was the one making the most significant impact on her event. Miles, who had been standing nearby, shifted uncomfortably. Recognition, disbelief, and perhaps a flicker of panic crossed his face. He had never considered that Harper, the woman he had taken for granted, mocked, and dismissed, could surpass him in wealth, influence, and confidence. And there I was, calm, composed, and fully aware of the power I now held. In that moment, I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to rub it in. The impact spoke for itself. Ellison Lane was no longer just a secret. It was proof that I was capable, unstoppable, and untouchable by the people who had once tried to limit me. Miles and Vivian finally saw, in the clearest terms, that underestimating me had been their greatest mistake. The night of the gala, I chose a gown from Ellison Lane that was daring yet elegant, a piece that reflected the woman I had become, confident, unapologetic, and entirely in control. The moment I stepped out of the car, heads turned. Whispers began, subtle at first, then spreading like wildfire. People were noticing not just the dress, but the aura, the presence I carried with it. I felt a quiet thrill. Tonight wasn't just about attending an event. It was about making a statement without saying a word. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and soft lighting, filled with influential guests, donors, and socialites. Vivian Trenton moved through the crowd with her usual practiced charm, unaware that the person she had spent years underestimating was about to upend everything she thought she knew. Miles stood nearby, talking to colleagues, completely oblivious to what was coming. I let them underestimate me one final time. When the MC called my name as the keynote donor, a ripple of surprise went through the room. I walked to the stage with measured grace, each step deliberate. Cameras turned toward me, and the murmurs grew louder. Miles froze, his eyes widening as he followed my movement. Vivian's smile faltered, replaced by a stunned, almost fearful silence. I could feel their disbelief, a tangible weight in the air. Taking the microphone, I spoke clearly, my voice steady, confident. I didn't need to shout or boast. I simply introduced Ellison Lane, explaining the new initiatives, the expansion into global markets, and our mission to support sustainable, female-led ventures. Each sentence carried weight because it was truth, and it was undeniable. I was no longer the quiet, underestimated woman who had once played small to appease their egos. I was the architect of a thriving empire, and they had been blind to it the entire time. Miles' face twisted through a mixture of confusion, anger, and awe as realization dawned on him. He understood for the first time that every sneer, every dismissal, every belittling comment had been aimed at someone far more capable than he had ever imagined. The shock was almost tangible, and I allowed myself a small, private smile. Vivian couldn't form a word. Her polite, controlled demeanor cracked, leaving only silence. The woman she had deemed a financial risk, someone she assumed would always be beneath her son's station, was standing before the room with undeniable power and respect. Every subtle insult she had ever delivered returned to her like a shadow she couldn't escape. The audience reacted with applause, admiration, and genuine excitement about the impact of Ellison Lane. I stepped back from the microphone, letting the attention linger on the numbers, the success, and the vision. My calm composure, my quiet certainty, was the ultimate revenge. I didn't need to humiliate them. Their own realization, the moment they recognized how completely they had underestimated me, was punishment enough. That night, I walked off the stage knowing the balance had shifted. I was no longer playing a small role in someone else's story. I was the author of my own, and for the first time, everyone, including Miles and Vivian, was forced to acknowledge it. The morning after the gala, I was in my office going over new orders and expansion plans when Miles showed up at Ellison Lane's headquarters. He didn't call, didn't text. He just walked in, trying to appear casual, but I could see the tension radiating from him. His eyes flicked around the room as if trying to gauge the size of my empire, and I let him take it all in. "Harper," he began, his voice unusually soft, almost pleading. "We need to talk. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can build something together, an empire, a future. Please, just give me another chance." I looked at him, calm and composed, not a trace of the old fear or hesitation that had haunted me for years. "Miles," I said slowly, "whatever foundation we had is gone. You destroyed it long ago. I can't rebuild what you were never willing to respect." He took a step closer, desperation creeping into his tone. "I've changed. I understand now. We can work together. You and me, we could be unstoppable. I shook my head gently, almost pitying the man who had once thought he held all the cards. You don't get it, I said. I've already been unstoppable without you. I built this, grew this, and protected it all while you doubted me, mocked me, and treated me like I was less than. I don't need you, and I don't want you. Miles' face fell. He opened his mouth to argue, to protest, but I didn't give him the chance. His words no longer held power over me. I realized that the anger I had carried, the hurt I had felt, had all been tools I used to fuel my growth. Now those emotions were gone, replaced by something far more satisfying, freedom. Then Vivian appeared, stepping lightly into the room, her usual poised expression slightly cracked. Harper, she started, her tone trying to sound sincere, but I recognized it immediately. This wasn't an apology born from understanding. This was damage control. I'm sorry for anything I said that may have hurt you. I hope we can. I raised a hand gently to stop her. Save it, I said. I don't need apologies to feel whole. I don't need recognition from people who never valued me when it mattered. I've already proven myself, and that's enough. I turned and walked past them, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders with every step. The city skyline stretched before me through the office windows, lights twinkling like reminders of all the possibilities waiting ahead. Ellison Lane's success, which had already started to make waves, was only going to grow from here. I didn't need validation from the people who doubted me. I had built my own empire, earned my own respect, and created a life defined on my own terms. As I stepped into the elevator, I felt a clarity I had never known before. No anger, no resentment, only freedom, power, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've conquered not just the world around you, but your own past. Miles and Vivian were behind me, irrelevant to my path forward. Ellison Lane would continue to thrive, unstoppable, and so would I. That chapter was closed, and I was finally free to write the next one. Months later, I stood on the balcony of my new home, the city lights stretching endlessly before me. The building was modern, sleek, and full of life, the kind of space I had only dreamed of years ago when I was hiding behind modest apartments and small successes. The air was crisp, carrying a faint hum of the city below, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. Ellison Lane had grown beyond what I had imagined. With the expansion fully underway, I had hired a team of talented, passionate individuals who shared my vision. Each person brought creativity, intelligence, and drive to the company, and every day felt like a collaboration built on respect and trust, something I had never experienced with Miles or his family. The energy in the office was infectious. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to carry the weight of proving myself alone. I could rely on others without feeling weak, because I had already built the foundation. I also started investing in other female-owned businesses, helping women who reminded me of my younger self, those who were underestimated, dismissed, or quietly ambitious. Watching them thrive, knowing I had a hand in their growth, gave me a deep satisfaction that money alone could never provide. Ellison Lane wasn't just my success anymore. It was a platform for empowerment, and it reminded me daily why I had worked so hard in silence for so many years. My days were full, purposeful, and unburdened by unnecessary drama. I no longer worried about seeking validation from anyone who had doubted me or trying to fix relationships that were never meant to be fixed. Closure didn't come from an apology or acknowledgement. It came from the moment Miles and Vivian realized the scale of what they had underestimated. That realization, the knowledge that they were forced to see my worth when it truly mattered, was more than enough. I didn't need their recognition, and I certainly didn't need their presence in my life. Evenings were my favorite. I would stand on the balcony, a glass of wine in hand, listening to the soft sounds of the city and thinking about everything I had built, quietly, patiently, deliberately. I thought about the woman I had been, underestimated and overlooked, and I smiled. That woman had survived, had risen, and had created a life entirely on her own terms. There was no bitterness left, only a profound sense of accomplishment and freedom. For the first time, I was completely centered. I wasn't chasing love, forgiveness, or approval. I was chasing purpose, growth, and joy. I chose myself every single day, my ambitions, my happiness, my vision for the future. And as I looked out over the city I had rebuilt my life in, I knew this was only the beginning. Ellison Lane would continue to thrive, my investments would empower others, and I would continue to move forward without ever looking back. I was solid, unshakable, and finally free. Do you think Harper made the right choice by walking away from Miles and his family? Or should she have stayed and tried to make it work? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And if you love stories about betrayal, empowerment, and personal triumph, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.